LC, this is OLC. Orion transfer to internal power is complete.
Roger.
The Orion spacecraft now operating on its own batteries. A beautiful morning for a launch in Florida. Coming up on 7 minutes before launch.
minus 7 minutes.
Status check to proceed with terminal count. MEQ.
Go.
MEA.
MEA go.
HYE.
Go.
LOX 1.
Go.
LOX 2.
Go.
BP.
Go.
PNE.
Go.
BP.
Go.
ATC 1.
Go.
PEA.
Go.
Fuel 1.
Go.
Fuel 2.
Go.
TM 1.
Go.
ATC 3.
Go.
TM 2.
Go.
FMA.
Go.
BE.
Go.
EEA.
Go.
GE.
Go.
SYS.
Go.
DSE.
Go.
Timer.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
QE.
Go.
USO.
Go.
OSM.
Go.
VSE.
VSE is go.
ALC.
Go.
AC.
AC is go.
RC.
Clear to proceed.
Launch Director.
This is the launch director, and you have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. MEQ established swing arm lock pins pull.
Active.
L minus 6 minutes.
SYS established record on change list activated.
Activated.
We have a final clear to launch. Managers across the country, more than 200 in count from NASA, Lockheed Martin, and United Launch Alliance, all working together for today's historic launch of the Orion spacecraft on a Delta IV heavy rocket. 5 minutes, 30 seconds before liftoff. Just a little more than a minute away from picking up the countdown.
L minus 5 minutes.
MEQ reports swing arm system ready.
Ready.
All steps are complete prior to terminal count.
Launch minus 4 minutes, 45 seconds. "30 seconds away from picking up the countdown. At T-minus 4 minutes and counting, we'll enter the terminal count and begin securing the second stage liquid oxygen tank. Picking up the count in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
T-minus 4 minutes and counting.
Upper stage lock securing started.
Vehicle transfer and internal.
3 minutes, 52 seconds.
Delta IV on internal power. The common booster core liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen tank securing will be started at T-minus 3 minutes, 32 seconds, including closing the propellant fill and drain valves.
T-minus 3 minutes, 32 seconds.
CBC propellant tank securing started.
Vehicle transfer internal complete.
A live shot from Jetty Park. Visitors and locals, campers, fishermen,
You're at flight level.
space aficionados,
T-minus 3 minutes, 14 seconds.
all gathered to watch today's launch.
CBC pre-press started.
T-minus 307.
Vehicle ordnance system will be armed, and the common booster core liquid oxygen and hydrogen
T-minus
prop
3
tanks
minutes.
are being
Vehicle
verified.
ordnance arming.
T-minus 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
LH2 CBC secured.
The liquid hydrogen common booster core tank
Vehicle
is
ordnance
secured.
armed.
Ordnance is armed. T-minus 2 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. At 2 minutes prior to liftoff, the team will verify that the hydraulic system is pressurized and confirm the Common Booster Core Delta
CBC locked,
Cryogenic
that flight
Second
pressure and
Stage
flight level.
DCSS
214.
and Flight Termination System battery voltages. Coming up on 2 minutes.
T-minus 2 minutes.
TPA script running.
Hydraulic press at 4,000.
Everything is go. At T-minus 1 minute 20 seconds, the team will begin securing the second stage liquid hydrogen tank. T-minus 1 minute 40 seconds.
T-minus 1 minute 30 seconds.
OLC, verify Orion nav transition is complete.
LC, this is OLC. Orion nav transition is complete.
120.
Second stage LH2 securing started.
At T-minus 60 seconds, the Eastern Range readiness will be verified.
CBC LH2 at flight pressure and flight level.
Working no issues.
T-minus 1 minute.
Engine start box go.
Rock, report range status.
Range green.
50 seconds. 45.
Everything is
Launch
go.
enabled, GE main power off.
Main power off.
40.
Upper stage LH2 secure at flight level.
35. 30.
Status check.
Go Delta.
Go Orion. Grain board.
25.
Flight lock in.
T-minus 20 seconds.
15.
Rofi ignition.
10.
The igniters have been lit.
9. 8. 7. 6.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff at dawn. The dawn of Orion and a new era of American space exploration.
Good engine control in the first stage. Passing 25 seconds. Velocity 1,341 feet per second. Passing 31 seconds, still looking good. Good engine control. Good chamber pressure in all three boosters in the full power mode. 40 seconds in. Standing by to go to the partial thrust mode in the core. And we have partial thrust command in the core. Core chamber pressure beginning to drop as expected as we're coming up on the 1 minute mark. Mark, 1 minute into the flight. Still looking good. Good chamber pressure in the core booster in the partial thrust mode. Good chamber pressure in port and starboard in full power mode. One minute, 15 seconds into the flight. We have the hydrazine supply valve open in the second stage. 1 minute, 22 seconds in. Max Q, maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle. Passing 124, Mach 1. Orion and Delta 4 now transcending the speed of sound. 1 minute, 31 seconds in. Good engine control in the first stage. Coming up 1 minute, 40 seconds. Velocity now 1,341 feet per second. 1 minute, 50 seconds in. Still looking good. Coming up on 2 minutes. 2 minutes into the flight. Good engine control in the first stage. Port and starboard boosters still at good chamber pressures in the full power mode and good core chamber pressure in the partial thrust mode at 2 minutes, 22 seconds in. 2 minutes, 35 seconds in. Still looking good. Coming up on the 2 minute, 43-second mark. Mark, 2 minutes, 43 seconds. The Delta IV of heavy rocket now just weighs 1/2 as much as it did at launch, burning propellant at the rate of 4,744 pounds per second. Three minutes, 1 second into the flight. Still looking good. Passing Mach 5. Three minutes, 16 seconds in. Good engine control. Less than 1/2 minute remains on 3-booster flight. 3 minutes, 30 seconds in. We're standing by for the command to go to the partial thrust mode in the port and starboard booster. That command should occur about 10 seconds from now. And we've had partial thrust command. Port and starboard should be toggling down to the partial thrust mode. Standing by for main engine cutoff. We have cutoff in the port and starboard and separation. A good separation of the port and starboard boosters. Core booster now powering up to the full power mode. 4 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Good chamber pressure in the port. Correction, good chamber pressure in the core booster at 4 minutes, 18 seconds in. Four minutes, 25 seconds in, still looking good. Good engine control in the core. About 1 minute remaining on first stage flight. Four minutes, 46 seconds in, still looking good. Chamber pressure holding very well in a core booster as we're approaching the 5 minute mark. 5 minutes into the flight. Standing by to go to the partial thrust command. That partial thrust command about 15 seconds from now. Good engine control. Five minutes, 20 seconds in. And we have partial thrust command in the core. Core chamber pressure beginning to go down. As expected, standing by for MECO. We have MECO. The main engine has cut off. Standing by for stage separation. Each have stage separation. Heads is deploying. The nozzle has been extending. Standing by for igniter spark. And we have igniter spark, and we have ignition. Ignition on the second stage. Second stage chamber pressures beginning to rise.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're taking over commentary at this point as we come up on the first two critical Orion program milestones, the service module fairing panel jettison and the launch abort system jettison, standing by for those first two critical events. The service panel jettison has occurred. The three 13 by 14 foot panels have separated. And we have launch abort system jettison. The 361-pound solid propellant motor has pulled the launch abort system free from the upper stage and up from Orion. Everything going extremely well. The first two critical milestones have been accomplished, and we are now processing telemetry from the Orion spacecraft through the tracking and data relay satellite system. Coming up on the 7-minute mark into the mission, Orion and the Delta IV upper stage now 127 miles in altitude, some 700 miles downrange from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Reports here in Mission Control indicate that Orion's guidance systems are up and running in good shape. This view once again of the service module fairing panel jettison that occurred just about a minute and a half ago. We are now coming up on the 8-minute mark into the flight. Orion and the Delta IV upper stage, 142 statute miles in altitude, almost 900 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. GPS systems on Orion have come into full agreement with navigation systems on the spacecraft. Orion is functioning perfectly at this point. Orion heading almost due east from the Kennedy Space Center in an orbit inclined just about 28.4 degrees to either side of the equator. 8.5 minutes into the flight, the upper stage is currently traveling and carrying Orion to its preliminary orbit, now traveling at a velocity of almost 14,000 miles an hour, its altitude flattening out. The upper stage ignition will continue for about 11 minutes and 30 seconds from the time it began, with SECO-1, or a second stage cutoff number 1, just about 8.5 minutes from now. And this is our first view from cameras on the Orion spacecraft streaming video that is coming down, being processed through the Tracking and Data Relay satellite system, showing a view of the Earth as Orion is being carried to its preliminary orbit, all of its systems operating in excellent condition on this first test flight of America's newest spacecraft. We are also processing telemetry through the Antigua tracking station in the Lesser Antilles, southeast of Puerto Rico. Coming up on the 10-minute mark into the flight, Orion is traveling almost 15,000 miles an hour, nearing its orbital insertion velocity. Ten and a half minutes into the flight, everything going extremely well. This view from one of the cameras in the Orion spacecraft looking at the limb of the Earth as it heads toward its preliminary orbit, sailing over the South Atlantic right now. Currently 155 statute miles above the Earth. The upper stage of the Delta IV rocket, once it cuts off on this first of 2 such burns for the upper stage in about 6 minutes and 45 seconds, will have left Orion in an orbit for its first lap of the Earth of about 560 by 120 statute miles. So far, all of the guidance and navigation systems on Orion operating perfectly as it rides at the top of the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket that began its maiden journey at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time, just right at the peak of sunrise over the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Coming up on the 12-minute mark into the flight. Orion now passing 15,000 miles an hour, almost 1,800 miles downrange from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The next major event, 5.5 minutes from now, that will be SECO-1, or second stage cutoff number 1. That will be the cutoff of the upper stage on the Delta IV rocket, the engine that has propelled Orion at this point uphill towards its preliminary orbit. A second burn of that upper stage will be coming at the 1 hour 55-minute mark into the mission. That will be a 4-minute 40-second burn that will take Orion out of low Earth orbit towards its peak altitude of some 3,630 statute miles above the Earth. About 15 minutes after SECO-1, or the shutdown of the upper stage engine on this first of two burns that the engine will perform, Orion will be commanded into a barbecue roll, basically like a piece of meat on a barbecue spit. It will roll on a very, very slow basis to provide very even thermal conditioning over the spacecraft for the duration of its flight toward deep space. 13.5 minutes into the flight, Orion in the upper stage of the Delta IV now traveling 16,000 miles an hour, more than 2,100 miles downrange from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Very quiet here in the flight control room. All the flight controllers belonging to the flight operations team under the direction of Flight Director Mike Serafin, enjoying the view from Orion's cameras, this first ever view from America's newest spacecraft as it continues its climb towards its preliminary orbit. This will be two orbits of the Earth, the first elliptical, the second highly elliptical, out to a distance of 3,630 statute miles, passing through the Van Allen radiation belts twice before its high-speed entry back into Earth and a parachute-assisted splashdown some 600 miles to the west of Baja, California, with the total duration for this test flight expected to be 4 hours, 23 minutes in duration. Fifteen minutes, 20 seconds into the flight since its launch from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, everything continuing to go extremely well with the first phase of Orion's maiden flight, moving from northwest to southeast across the South Atlantic, soon to approach the west coast of Africa. There are a flotilla of tracking stations around the world that are joining to process telemetry from Orion in concert with the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. We have been processing data and telemetry through Antigua. There is a tracking station in South Africa that will also augment the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System, as well as tracking stations at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, the tracking station at Kwajalein Island out of the Pacific, the Hawaiian tracking station as well, all contributing to process almost uninterrupted data from Orion for this first test flight. 16 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Orion is now some 222 statute miles above the Earth at its apogee, continuing to climb as we approach the 1 minute mark before second stage cutoff. "45 seconds now until the cutoff of the upper stage engine on the Delta IV rocket for the completion of the first of its two burns. We're going to go back to Steve Agate of United Launch Alliance now at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Hangar AE. Steve?
And we have SECO. The engine has cut off. Cutoff appeared to be very close to the expected time. The second burn of the second stage engine should begin about 1 hour and 37 minutes from now. Now 18 minutes into the flight. Altitude now about 100 nautical miles. Velocity 26,210 feet per second. Downrange distance 2,908 nautical miles.
That is Steve Agate at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Hangar AE, United Launch Alliance's telemetry engineer, calling the shutdown of the upper stage engine right on time. The flight dynamics officer here in Mission Control, Mark McDonald, reporting that Orion is right on the marks, a perfect insertion into its first orbit. We are currently orbiting at an altitude of 554 by 115 statute miles. And as you can see from the tracking map here, Orion and the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket moving from northwest to southeast, approaching the west coast of Africa. This is an orbit reminiscent of the early days of the shuttle program, when shuttle missions used to send the space shuttle into an almost due easterly orbit. Once the second stage burn of the Delta IV second stage or upper stage engine is complete, we'll be able to more precisely calculate its orbit as it climbs away from Earth. And as we've mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this will be the first time in 42 years since the final Apollo mission in December of 1972 that a human-rated or human-occupied spacecraft will have ventured that far away from Earth. The peak altitude some 14 times further away from Earth than is the International Space Station that is currently orbiting with its 6 occupants of the Expedition 42 crew just 262 statute miles above the Earth. Here in the flight control room, as we continue to enjoy the views out of one of the windows in the Orion crew module, these flight test cameras are providing spectacular views as Orion is now traveling over the Caribbean at an altitude of 553 by 116 statute miles. The flight dynamics officer here in Mission Control has reported to Flight Director Mike Serafin that everything is in readiness for the restart of the upper stage engine on the Delta IV rocket. That is expected to fire for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Countdown clocks here ticking backward toward the ignition of that upper stage for the second and final time just 6 minutes from now. We're just 5 minutes away now from the reignition of the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket. Once it completes its burn, which again will be about 4 minutes and 40 seconds in duration, Orion will begin and reinitiate a barbecue roll, a very, very slow rotational roll around its axis to maintain even thermal heating as it passes through the Van Allen radiation belt for the first time, heading toward its peak altitude of more than 3,600 miles away from Earth. This is Mission Control Houston, once again with the view from one of Orion's flight test cameras in the crew module of this new spacecraft that is performing to perfection in the first 2 hours of its maiden flight. We are coming up on the 2.5-minute mark before the reignition of the upper stage engine on the Delta IV that will enable Orion to break out of low Earth orbit and head to a point more than 3,600 miles above the Earth on its second and final orbit of the Earth, a highly elliptical orbit that will set Orion up for its high-speed entry back into Earth and a parachute-assisted splashdown in the Pacific west of Baja California. We are going to go back to United Launch Alliance's telemetry engineer Steve Agid now, who is in Hangar AE at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, where Orion began its journey not quite 2 hours ago, as he reports coming up on the reignition of the Delta IV upper stage.
This is Delta Flight Commentary at 1 hour, 53 minutes, 21 seconds into the flight. Now 2 minutes remain until the start of the second burn of the second stage. This is Delta Flight Commentary at 1 hour, 53 minutes, 51 seconds of the flight, less than a minute and a half before the second burn of the second stage. This is Delta Flight Commentary at 1 hour, 54 minutes, 25 seconds. Less than 1 minute remains until the start of the second burn. This is Delta Flight Commentary at 1 hour, 55 minutes into the flight. Standing by for our second burn about 15 seconds from now. And we have igniter spark. And we have ignition. Ignition on the second stage. Second stage chamber pressure is beginning to rise. Good chamber pressure in the second stage. This second burn of the second stage is to last 4 minutes 42 seconds. Chamber pressure is stable. Engine control is good. 1 minute 55 seconds. 1 hour 55 minutes 53 seconds into the flight. About 4 minutes remaining in the burn. Continuing to look good. Chamber pressure's holding right where we want them to be. Good engine control. About 3 minutes 45 seconds remaining in the burn. Still looking good. Chamber pressure is holding. Good engine control. Very stable burn. Velocity increasing to 27,000 feet per second. One hour, 57 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Engine control continues to look good. Chamber pressure continuing to look good. Good control. 1 hour, 57 minutes, 30 seconds in. About 2.5 minutes remain on the burn. Velocity now passing 27,538 feet per second. 2 minutes remaining on the burn. Chamber pressure is continuing to hold right where we want them to be. Good engine control in the second stage. Velocity now increasing to 27,723 feet per second. Chamber pressure is continuing to hold right where we want them to be. Good engine control. Velocity increasing to 27,956 feet per second. Less than 1 minute remained in the burn. Apogee increasing to 2,215 nautical miles. All continuing to go well. Chamber pressure continues to hold. Good burn, very stable. Very good engine control. About 20 seconds remaining in the burn. Apogee now increasing to 2,590 nautical miles. Standing by for SECO 2. And we have SECO. Beam is locked. The burn is complete. Recovering from SECO. Burn looks stable.
And back here in Mission Control in Houston, the Flight Dynamics Officer, Mark McDonnell, reporting to Flight Director Mike Serafin that we had a perfect second stage restart burn that lasted 4 minutes and 40 seconds in duration. The burn was initiated at right on time, just off the northern coast of South America, north of Guyana. And now Orion is beginning to climb away from Earth, heading for a peak altitude that will result in it arriving at about 3,630 miles away from the planet at its peak altitude opportunity, just about an hour from now. It is at that point that it will begin to complete its furthest transit away from the Earth and make all of the preparations essential for its high-speed return back to Earth and a splashdown under 3 main parachutes in the Pacific, some 600 miles west of Baja California. The current altitude of Orion atop the second stage of the Delta IV rocket is now beginning to climb away from Earth as Orion passes just south of the equator, moving from northwest to southeast at an altitude now of some 3,000 miles above the Earth, and again will pass through the Van Allen radiation belt a short time from now. Its flight test cameras are going to be powered down for this first transit of 2 planned for passing through the radiation belts of the Van Allen radiation region. Those flight test cameras will be powered down just a couple of minutes from now, and then it will be a 15-minute transit through the Van Allen radiation belt to test the shielding on the spacecraft and the effect of that radiation on its avionics. So we'll be back here at Mission Control a short time from now, everything going perfectly on the maiden flight of Orion at a mission elapsed time of 2 hours and 3 minutes. Let's go back to Brandy Dean now at Hangar AE at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida.
And here's a live view from the windows of Orion looking down at the Earth. Continuing to move to that peak altitude of 3,600 miles above the Earth and getting a more distant view of Earth than we've seen in a while from Orion's continuing to move upward to that 3,600 altitude mark and should be there in about half an hour. As we do get farther away from the Earth, that view of it will continue to shrink, and we'll hope to continue showing it to you regularly here. Although Orion will be doing some maneuvers that will bring it in and out of view, but we'll hope to get a good look at it from 3,600 miles away. That should show us a full view of the Earth from the Orion window.
Thanks, Brandy. Back here in Mission Control in the Orion Flight Control Room, the flight operations team led by Lead Flight Director Mike Serafin watching the performance of Orion. A very telling moment just a few minutes ago. Serafin was going to take a break from console, and he asked on the flight loop to his flight controllers, "Is anybody working anything?" And there was dead silence, a testimony to the performance of the Orion spacecraft to this point. It has been operating in flawless fashion as we pass the 2.5-hour mark into the mission. But the real metal to be tested is coming up in the next hour and 50 minutes between now and splashdown time, when Orion will reach its peak altitude and then begin the return trip back to Earth. It did pass through the Van Allen radiation belt with 0 effects on its avionics, on its shielding, all of its systems performing to perfection. You saw that dramatic view of the Earth. Orion is currently at an altitude of 2,744 statute miles above the Earth, with about 900 miles yet to climb to reach its peak altitude. In the meantime, the propulsion officer here in Mission Control is preparing for the activation of the reaction control system on Orion that will be utilized to maintain its correct orientation during its high-speed return back to its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. The flight dynamics officer here in Mission Control is also working to begin to calculate a precise splashdown target in terms of latitude and longitude with the guidance system, as well as the GPS system on board Orion coming into full agreement on the trajectory of the spacecraft as it continues to ride uphill on top of the service module and the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket that launched Orion just over 2 hours and 35 minutes ago at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time. As we approach peak altitude, we're currently 3,200 statute miles above the Earth. There is another fabulous view of our planet from one of the flight test cameras in the crew module of the spacecraft. Orion is currently orbiting at that altitude, about to begin a southwest to northeasterly track that will carry it across the west coast of Australia a short time from now. Just to recap several times upcoming for key events. Once again, we are expecting Orion to reach its peak altitude just a few minutes from now at 9:05 a.m. Central Time. We'll receive a final update on splashdown targeting by the flight dynamics officer. The latitude and longitude of the expected splashdown point for the vehicle will be inhibiting the attitude control system as the second stage of the Delta IV rocket goes into free drift in preparation for the separation of the crew module from the service module. That's expected 38 minutes from now at about 9:28 a.m. Central Time. The flight director here, Mike Serafin, will be assessing Orion systems before he gives a go-no-go decision for extended power-up of the spacecraft after it splashes down in the Pacific. That will be of value for Lockheed Martin as it evaluates the thermal effects of Orion's high-speed return back to Earth. The nominal power-down scenario would call for a power-down and a handover from this flight control team to the NASA Navy recovery forces out in the Pacific. That normally would occur about 15 minutes after splashdown, but the latest plan, if Orion systems can support it, would call for that power down to occur about an hour after splashdown, at which point the flight control team here in Houston would hand over to the recovery team out in the Pacific, and the job by this team of flight controllers will be done for the day. This is Mission Control Houston. Orion is now 3 hours, 5 minutes into the maiden flight of Orion, with 1 hour, 19 minutes to go before predicted splashdown in the Pacific. This is Mission Control Houston. The Flight Dynamics Officer, Mark McDonald, reports that Orion reached its peak altitude at 9:11 a.m. Central Time, just about 1 minute ago, at a mission elapsed time of 3 hours and 6 minutes into the flight. Peak altitude was calculated by Orion's navigation systems to be 3,604.2 statute miles. That's the equivalent of 3,132 nautical miles. So Orion is now heading downhill, if you will, on the trek back to Earth and a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean 1 hour 17 minutes from now. Again, peak altitude reached at 9:11 a.m. Central Time. That peak altitude calculated by the Flight Dynamics Officer to be 3,604.2 statute miles, or 3,132 nautical miles. Crew member sitting inside the crew module, you would be experiencing a pull of 8.2 Gs. That's just to put that in perspective, a crew that returns from Earth in a Soyuz spacecraft from the International Space Station pulls about 4.5 Gs as it enters into the Earth's atmosphere. So Orion will be pulling about 8.2 Gs during the course of its high-speed reentry back to Earth. Its predicted splashdown target is just 1.3 nautical miles, or 1.5 statute miles, east of its pre-flight predicted target. That's almost a bullseye splashdown expected for Orion. And the coordinates of the predicted splashdown site: 23.61 degrees north latitude, 116.46 degrees west longitude, some 600 statute miles west of Baja California. The Spaceflight Meteorology Group here at the Johnson Space Center has maintained its forecast throughout the morning of winds out of 0 degrees at about 12 knots at the splashdown site, and wave heights of about 4.5 feet. Those wave heights have picked up ever so slightly since the beginning of the mission just over 3 hours ago, but certainly well within constraints for a safe and efficient recovery of Orion once it's on the water. Inside 30 seconds now until crew module separation. Crew module separation is now confirmed at 9:28 a.m. Central Time. Orion flies free for the first time in its history at a mission elapsed time of 3 hours 24 minutes into its maiden flight. Orion currently processing excellent guidance commands through its onboard system, its thrusters providing perfect control. And welcome back to the Orion Flight Control Room here at Mission Control in Houston, where the team of flight controllers under the direction of Mike Serafin, the lead flight director, on console as they have been since the wee hours this morning, and now are heading into the home stretch of this milestone mission for the United States. While you were at Hangar AE with Brandy Dean, Serafin polled his team of flight controllers here for an extension of the power-up of Orion once it is on the water in the Pacific Ocean. So that power-up extension to keep Orion powered up from a nominal time of 15 minutes after splashdown has been approved. So Orion will stay powered up now for an hour after its predicted splashdown just 33.5 minutes from now. And that will enable Lockheed Martin to gain some valuable data on the thermal effects after Orion is back on Earth, so that it will enhance the post-flight analysis of all of Orion's systems and how they fared during its flight of 4 hours and 23 minutes. Just a few moments ago, the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket and its attached service module that Orion had been attached to, it performed a final burn of that upper stage engine, a disposal burn, if you will, to place at a safe distance away from Orion, and it will plummet into the ocean to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, its job having been well completed throughout the day today. So the next major milestone we're looking at is just 7 minutes from now. That will be about a 10-second firing of the thrusters on Orion in what is called the crew module raise burn. It's essentially a burn to test the thrusters and to slightly orient the spacecraft into the proper attitude or orientation for its entry into the Earth's atmosphere, which is scheduled just 22 minutes from now. We're about two minutes away from the raise burn, as it is called, this brief firing of Orion's thrusters to fine-tune its orientation relative to the angle of attack that it will be arriving at once it enters the Earth's atmosphere just 18.5 minutes from now. Orion using its strings of thrusters, 2 redundant strings of thrusters, 6 thrusters to each string to provide the proper orientation for this so-called raise burn. Again, this raise burn is simply a test of the thruster system before Orion begins to plummet back into the Earth's atmosphere. A series of critical activities will be happening in rapid-fire succession once Orion reaches the Earth's atmosphere. The jettisoning of the forward bay cover, that is basically at the very top of the spacecraft, that will expose the variety of parachutes that we'll talk about once again in just a moment. Orion now has maneuvered into the correct orientation for its raise burn and for its ultimate angle of attack into the Earth's atmosphere. And the raise burn is in progress. Good control by the Guidance Navigation and Control Officer. And the raise burn is complete. We are now into the coast to entry segment of this flight. Orion currently targeting a splashdown point with the coordinates once again from the Flight Dynamics Officer of 23.61 degrees north latitude, 116.46 degrees west longitude. That should put its splashdown just about 1.5 miles, 1.5 statute miles east of the intended splashdown target that had been predicted and modeled for this brand new spacecraft pre-flight. The parachute system that will enable Orion to descend from a blistering speed of 20,000 miles an hour at entry interface to a gentle 20 miles an hour at splashdown just about 11 minutes later. The Orion again will be entering the atmosphere and will start heating up and slowing down due to the drag of the atmosphere. At about 24,000 feet, the forward bay cover parachute mortars will fire to pull the 3 chutes above the vehicle. About 1.5 seconds later, at 23,400 feet, that forward bay cover is jettisoning. It will be jettisoned, exposing the drogue, pilot, and main parachutes. 2 drogue mortars will fire about 2 seconds after the forward bay cover is jettisoned, and the drogue parachutes will unfurl, stabilizing the crew module. Some 56 seconds later, the drogue parachutes are released. 3 pilot mortars will fire at approximately 7,980 feet, releasing the 3 pilot parachutes, which in turn pull the main parachutes out. The pilot parachutes release from the main chutes, allowing the mains to unfurl. Both the drogue and the main chutes will reef at deployment, which is a gradual unfurling of those chutes, preventing a rapid deceleration and reducing the possibility of damaging the parachutes themselves. These main parachutes will reef by opening to about 3% of their full size for 8 seconds, then about 10% of their full size for another 8 seconds. Then they'll be fully opened until splashdown, at which time they'll be released from the crew module. The 3 main parachutes, as you've heard described in other discussions throughout the course of our broadcast today, are quite impressive. These 3 chutes, when fully deployed, stretch the length of a football field. They're each 116 feet in diameter, 220 feet in total length once deployed. We are 13 minutes away from entry interface. Orion transiting the Pacific Ocean, currently at an altitude of 887 miles, having reached its peak altitude not quite an hour ago of 3,604 statute miles above the Earth, having performed flawlessly in its first flight, exceeding expectations to this point, but now the critical milestones of entry must be met, and will be met in rapid-fire succession, as we said, with 22 minutes until splashdown. You can see here on the forward screen here in Mission Control the flight dynamics tracking and the guidance tracking of Orion right down the pike for its intended splashdown point, just 275 miles west of Baja California, some 630 miles southwest of San Diego, to which Orion will be towed to the naval base in San Diego by the USS Anchorage once it is safely inside the well deck of that vessel. Nine and a half minutes until entry interface. Launched from Complex 37 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station 4 hours 10 minutes ago. Orion is now less than 14 minutes from its return to Earth, anticipating the succession of events that will begin 3.5 minutes from now at the point of entry interface, where Orion will reach a velocity of some 20,000 miles an hour, some 84% of the velocity that a spacecraft would encounter on a trip back from the moon. And now we're receiving live video from Orion, from inside the crew module and one of the flight test cameras. 3 minutes away from entry interface. Orion right on track, its guidance perfect. We may be experiencing a telemetry loss of signal during a brief blackout period after entry interface, when the plasma effects begin to build around the spacecraft. That may begin at an altitude of about 374,000 feet, may continue up until about 151,000 feet, but this is a variable, and we'll stand by to see if in fact we do lose any data during this brief blackout period, and if so, for how long. Everything quiet here in the flight control room. Flight controllers under the direction of Mike Serafin, the lead flight director, watching their data. Inside 2 minutes until entry interface. Orion now 132 miles above the Earth, range to splashdown 1,200 miles. 11 minutes until splashdown. Coming up on 1 minute until entry interface. Standing by for entry interface. Orion now at an altitude of 470,000 feet, 900 miles from its splashdown target. Guidance officer confirms that Orion has reached entry interface. The moment of truth for Orion for the next 9 minutes 45 seconds. And as expected, we have reached a loss of telemetry as we enter this brief blackout period. At the time of the blackout, the flight dynamics officer reported that all of Orion's systems looked perfect. This is the point in time where Orion would be experiencing its peak heating of some 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit as it barrels through the Earth's atmosphere, traveling about 20,000 miles an hour, some 84% of the velocity of a spacecraft returning from the moon. We're 4 minutes away from the jettison of the forward bay cover at the very top of the spacecraft that will begin the chute deployment sequence. And we've reacquired signal from Orion, good data being processed. This view from the Icana unpiloted airborne vehicle over the Pacific Ocean, over the splashdown zone. Time to splashdown 7 minutes. Range to splashdown 127 miles. And now this view from Orion, its thrusters maintaining control. Flight dynamics officer reports that we're tracking right down the middle. G-force is building up on Orion, now almost to 3 Gs. A predicted G-force load of some 8 to 8.3 Gs expected. And the global positioning system satellites have a good lock on Orion as it heads toward its splashdown target. We're 2.5 minutes away from forward bay cover jettison, and this view again from the Icana aircraft over the splashdown zone. Orion at 125,000 feet. Healthy thruster system reported by the propulsion officer here in Mission Control. Passing through 80,000 feet. Range to splashdown about 5 miles. Passing through 60,000 feet. Orion has gone subsonic. Standing by for forward bay cover jettison. $35,000 feet. That view of Orion from the Icana. $25,000 feet. Time to splashdown, less than 4 minutes. Forward bay cover has been deployed. Drogues have been deployed. Great video from the Icana. $15,000 feet until splashdown. Coming up on main chute deploy. From a waypoint over the Pacific Ocean, there is your new spacecraft, America. Drogues away. Main chute deploy. On mains, everything looking good. Good reefing reported. $4,000 feet. Three good main chutes reported from the USS Anchorage. That's confirmed here in Mission Control. From a high-speed rate of 20,000 miles an hour to a gentle return back to Earth more than 4 hours and 20 minutes after it took off on a Delta IV heavy rocket from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. $3,200 feet now until splashdown. $2,200 feet now. Winds at the surface just about 12 knots. Wave heights no more than about 4.5 feet or so. Perfect conditions for Orion's homecoming. This view from Orion itself of the chutes, helping it to descend gently towards its splashdown in the Pacific. 1,000 feet. Just a few hundred feet until splashdown. "100 feet. We have splashdown. Splashdown confirmed at 10:29 a.m. Central Time. Orion is back on Earth. America has driven a golden spike as it crosses a bridge into the future. And we now have confirmation that Orion is stable 1, upright. Orion splashdown at a mission elapsed time of 4 hours and 24 minutes. And the crew module uprighting system is now being activated. These are the 5 inflatable airbags at the top of the spacecraft to ensure that Orion remains in an upright position. And you can see it on the water. The flight dynamics officer now has provided a final splashdown target in the Pacific with a latitude of 23.6 degrees north latitude, 116.46 degrees west longitude, a bullseye splashdown for America's newest spacecraft. Splashdown occurring once again at 10:29 a.m. Central Time, 8:29 a.m. Pacific Time, at a point some 270 miles or so west of Baja, California, about 630 statute miles southwest of San Diego. This is Mission Control Houston. Here in the flight control room, procedures for post-splashdown activities and the monitoring of data. And there you can see in the mission director's room at Hangar AE at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, smiles, exuberance, celebration. Orion's maiden flight from start to finish was picture perfect. Significant milestones achieved for the Orion program as we move forward towards future steps that will ultimately take us to Mars. But this day belonged to the team all the way around: Lockheed Martin, United Launch Alliance, NASA, all of the contractors involved in the development and testing of Orion for what turned out to be the most perfect flight you could ever imagine in a first flight of a vehicle that was being tested, a brand new vehicle launched on a Delta IV rocket, a splashdown right on target in the Pacific Ocean, a significant milestone for America's space program. The preliminary word from the Pacific is that the pilot chutes and the drogue chutes were not recovered. That was not unexpected. The main chutes are nearby. Those are expected to be recovered. This smoke flare and the green dye in the ocean indicating to the airborne recovery team exactly where the Orion is located, so that they can make their way in a more efficient fashion towards the spacecraft. Also receiving reports now that the forward bay cover was not recoverable either in the Pacific Ocean. But again, all the data of all of the functionality of Orion during its high-speed return back to Earth has been logged and will be analyzed by Lockheed Martin and the Orion program in the days and weeks ahead.
And Houston Flight, this is NRD. Go ahead.
NRD, I am happy to report that Orion is powered down, and we are not carrying any hazards associated with recovery. While we're not quite sure what happened with the fifth CMIS bag, right now we do not have any liens against recovery per the hazard checklist. How do you copy?
And Houston Flight, I copy loud and clear. That's great news, Mike. Our team is anxious and ready to approach this EM and get into our nominal recovery into the well deck of the anchorage. And knowing there's no hazards makes it a whole lot easier for us moving forward through the rest of the recovery.
Okay, you understand. Pass on our thanks to the captain and crew of the USS Anchorage and the USNS Salvor. Today was a great day for America. We challenged our best and brightest to continue to lead in space. The men and women of America poured their hearts and souls into this mission, and along the way they inspired others. We became part of something greater than ourselves, and while this was an unmanned mission, we were all on board Orion. NRD, we're going to sign off from Houston.
And Houston Flight, great words. Congratulations to you and your team for an outstanding mission It's pretty amazing to put Orion exactly in the spot that you had predicted. Put it in a great place for us to recover it, and we'll be spending the next couple hours getting Orion squared away and into the Anchorage as well deck. From our side here, all the recovery forces are very excited, and we appreciate the great work you guys did today, and we'll continue working.
We copy NRD, and we look forward to the return of Orion.
Copy that. Thank you, sir.
Houston signing off.